is Notsam Wrestling.
Introducing your host from New York, here is Sam Roberts.
Let's welcome to Notsam Wrestling somebody who has made himself known in the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years, very, very strongly in the wrestling community. Ladies and gentlemen, star of YouTube, Chris Van Vliet is here. Chris.
We're doing this, man.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for being on, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is a pleasure. A big reason that I started doing my YouTube videos the way that I was doing them is because you were doing your YouTube videos the way that you were doing them. So here we are. It's the crossover that we never asked for, but we have anyway.
Yeah, I kind of look at some of your stuff, and I remember it does feel very much like the stuff that I have done and kind of continue to do. But I was like, man, if we had the technology today, can you imagine? Because I look at the stuff that you do, and I'm like, it's so much easier now to travel and to create a setup that looks super professional and that you can do anywhere.
Yeah, which most of my interviews, at least the in-person ones, are done with an iPhone. And when I say most of them, I mean all of them. All of them are done with an iPhone. And when I started doing my videos on my YouTube channel in 2011, I'd be terrified. I would be terrified to record an entire interview with an iPhone, like an hour-long interview. I'd be terrified it wasn't going to work.
Yeah. But now they got iPhone 12 and they're like, would you like Dolby Sound? And you're like, I guess. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, if I have to.
Sure, why not? So you started working in media, and as a wrestling fan, I mean, these are my favorite stories. This is my story. You're working in media. You're just a super wrestling fan. You realize that you have access to wrestlers. You realize that you can just talk to them about wrestling. Why not? And boom, we're off to the races. Were you a wrestling fan all your life?
So I've been a wrestling fan my whole life, kind of in and out, and really became a hardcore fan right around 15, 16 years old in the Attitude Era. But my first memory of wrestling was being at my grandparents' house, and just sports was just always on the TV. So whether it was basketball or baseball, a lot of hockey growing up in Canada. But if one of those wasn't on Saturday night, wrestling would be on. And that was where I was first introduced to it. And, there were the larger than life characters like Hogan and Macho Man. But then also for some reason, the ones that really stick out in my head are Repo Man and Coco Beware, the Birdman.
The best.
Right. And wrestling was just the larger than life. And I was aware of it, but, didn't watch a ton of it. And I was on a high school wrestling team. And when you're a high school wrestler, when you're doing amateur wrestling, they'll tell you what we do in here is real.
Right.
That stuff on TV, I mean, that stuff's fake. And a really good friend of mine was a huge wrestling fan. And back in the 90s, when you had a friend, you did this crazy thing called talking on the phone.
Isn't that weird that two dudes would just call each other and just talk? When I was in school, my buddy would just call me in the afternoon because what else are we going to do? And we'd be on the phone for an hour and a half just talking about nothing.
This was pre-texting. This was pre-DMing. This was pre-aiming. Wow, aiming. Yeah.
Aim.
So you would talk on the phone, and I knew that every Monday night at 9:00, our phone call would abruptly come to an end because Raw was starting. And I remember one week I was like, yeah, whatever. Let's finish this conversation. I'll stick on the phone with you here and deal with this thing. And I just got sucked in. And it was Austin McMahon. That was the big storyline at the time. And I just got sucked in. And when I love something, when I become passionate about something, I go all the way in.
It's the only way to be.
I dive right in. I don't check the temperature of the water. I don't check the depth. I just dive right in. And that's how I was. I went from watching 0 minutes of wrestling a year to watching Raw and Nitro, then Raw replayed the next day on TSN in Canada. Then I watched Thunder, and I watched ECW, and I watched Heat, and I watched Metal and Jacked, and then we'd watch pay-per-views, and I was all the way in.
Yeah. It's amazing too. When you go back and look at how much wrestling programming there was, because people talk about it now, but you go back and you see Sunday Night Heat. In your head, you think oh, that was kind of just a throwaway show, but it really wasn't. You go back and watch some of those, especially the earlier episodes of Sunday Night Heat. That was 7 p.m. Sunday nights. In the States, it was on MTV, and you've got Undertaker and Kane having matches as a team.
Yeah.
on Sunday Night Heat. Like, that's how big wrestling was, that they were like, look, there's no throwaway shows, because whenever we put wrestling on, millions of people are going to watch.
Well, Shotgun and Jacked kind of felt like throwaway shows a little bit.
Shotgun started so strong, though. I don't know if you watched the early Shotgun, but like when Shotgun first came on, it was like a totally new thing. They set up a ring in a bar in New York, and you would just have this weird, kind of more adult-oriented, pre-Attitude Era-y wrestling show that was in the middle of a bar in New York, and you're like, this is amazing. But then I think, yeah, somebody realized that it's Saturday at midnight on syndicated cable. Like, we're putting so much money into this. That's crazy. What if we just put on some afterthought matches instead that we taped 2 weeks ago? And they're like, okay, we could do that instead.
Right. I was so into wrestling that a year or two after I, rediscovered it, I became a backyard wrestler. I then had dreams of wanting to be a pro wrestler. I was still doing the amateur high school wrestling, and I'll never forget it. I was in a match with this guy who was so much better than me at wrestling, and he was just destroying me. Like, it was like 8-0 in the match, and I just gone out of bounds, and I whispered to him as we were heading back to the match. I said, back to the center of the circle. I said, I'll give you a tornado DDT off the judges table, and I'll just take the DQ. And he's like, this was like an actual athlete. And here I was like, I'm going to give you a tornado DDT. Like, what? And then like 15 seconds later, the match was over because, he beat me.
And he's like, I'd prefer to just beat you, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not taking a DQ. I don't know what a tornado DDT is, but no, sir.
I love that you're trying to call spots, though, in amateur wrestling. Like, you're like, all right, I'm going to do a tornado DDT. I'll take the DQ. You work the arm after that. Cool.
No.
And he's like, what?
I also remember being fascinated that very few of the moves in professional wrestling could be done in amateur wrestling.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, the reverse you could probably pull off, but yeah, not the other way. Like, you can't even do a regular DDT, let alone a tornado DDT.
No, absolutely. I remember I did a crossface on someone, and a crossface in amateur wrestling is with one arm across their face to grab their other arm.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I did it too hard that I broke the guy's nose and ended up losing 2 points for like being too aggressive.
What?
I looked at the referee. I'm like, how else am I supposed to do a crossface?
Yeah. No, too aggressive. You were in the wrong sport. I just wish this had been like in the future and you were doing it now, and you're like, yeah, I tried to get him in the bank statement, and I just couldn't quite flip over. So, but when you started amateur wrestling, like, this is kind of fascinating to me, that I did amateur wrestling when I was only for 1 year, when I was in 8th grade. I did the whole season because I don't quit things. But I also had a perfect record throughout the season. I'm not going to tell you which side the 0 was on. Like, yeah. So I went 0-13.
Woo.
Yeah. I mean, it was a long haul, and there was that moment, like, I even got to that place where when you're beat kind of before you even start. Like, I remember like one of my last, I did most of the time I really tried. And a couple of times I did get that emotional wave where you like almost like break down and cry after you lose and you don't expect it, like, because there's just there's such an emotional output going out because there's the physical output and everything. But I remember towards the end of the season looking at this guy. He was all like, jacked 8th grade kid, and like he had this look of intensity in his eyes where he was just in a place of maturity that I was not there. And I remember looking at him and going like, this is gonna be a quick one in my head. Like, this is not going to last long at all. And it did not. I was right about that. But I don't think, not that I thought I was going to get in there and throw people through tables and stuff like that, but I don't think I would have done a season of amateur wrestling had I not been a WWE fan. Like, I just thought it was the closest thing to WWE that I could do at school. It's interesting to me that you were in your non-pro wrestling fan phase when you started amateur wrestling. You just did it for the sport.
But yeah, I actually think that arguably the closest thing to pro wrestling in high school is drama club.
I was much better at that. I was much better at theater.
So I think there's actually a lot more parallels there, which is crazy to say it.
Yeah.
But no, I just really liked combat. I ended up becoming an MMA fan and a UFC fan. I just liked that. I don't know. I was just really drawn to it. And then me becoming a pro wrestling fan made me appreciate amateur wrestling that much more. Actually made me a better amateur wrestler, I feel like.
Yeah. Did you now, after you catch on in the Attitude Era and you get obsessed and you backyard wrestle and were there any dead spots after that? Like, I'm always really interested in people's dead spots as a fan. Cause I mean, like the most hardcore of hardcore fans now and people who are like, they do it as part of their work, who do have spots where they were just like, yeah, I just wasn't a fan during this era. After the Attitude Era, like, did you fall off at all or did you maintain?
So when I went to college, it fell off a little bit. Although I was like the most annoying wrestling fan for the first 2 years of college. Like I was, this is so embarrassing. I was forcing people, not forcing them, but telling them to call me by my backyard wrestling name, which was Chris Sharp.
No, bro, call me by my gimmick name.
Yeah,
I don't want kayfabe, brother.
Just call me Sharp. So there were people in my dorm that thought my real last name was Sharp, and like this was bad. One of my backyard wrestling friends was my roommate for the first semester of my first year of college. So we were like putting on these backyard wrestling matches in like our lounge of our dorm. It was ridiculous. I was like, yes, I was living the gimmick. It was so crazy. I remember there was a talent show and we wanted our talent to be, we'll put on this 5-minute like wrestling match. And they were like, no. We're like, are you saying this isn't a talent?
Yeah.
We're like, no, that's just, we want people that are singing and playing instruments and doing magic. Like, so you haven't even seen us do this and you're saying no.
That's prejudice.
And they said, okay, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., we'll watch you do your thing. Okay. So we went, we put on our little match, and then afterwards, huffing and puffing.
It's blown up.
Sorry, we can't have this as part of the show. Well, at least thank you for letting us, giving it a try. So I'd say a little bit, probably halfway through college, my focus was just elsewhere.
Sure.
My passion I was always passionate about broadcasting.
Sure.
And I was starting to try to figure out a way, like, how can I make this thing that I'm studying my job one day? And I was still aware of what was going on in wrestling. So this would have been 2003, 4, 5. I remember I was dating a girl at that time. Monday night, I put on wrestling and she's like, we are not watching this. And I said, I don't complain when you put on the shows that you put on. Like, let's just.
I would have ended the relationship right there. Right there. We're not going to get along, lady.
Oh, see you later.
Yeah. We don't have the same interest. Yeah. When I was in high school and I was dating a girl who was like, I mean, she wasn't intolerant of wrestling. She was just completely unaware of it. And I was trying to explain it to her. And she was like, wait. So they know the results ahead of time. They're cooperating. And I'm like, yes. And she goes, but they're really hurting each other. I go, yes. And she's like, is it like sexual? I'm like, no. What? What? No. What? No. Huh?
So I fell off. Yeah, I fell off like 03, 04, 05, then came back and really haven't looked back since. Like, I've been a super fan. But even when I had fallen off, a friend of a friend was working for WWE Canada at the time. And like, every time that he came by our place, he'd be like, hey, here's tickets to the next show. I'm like, for free?
Yeah.
I don't have to pay? And I'm like, yes, I'm in. Let's go.
And you'd still go, and it was awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So at what point did you really go like, you know what? I got amateur wrestling background. I'm in good shape. I'm a backyard wrestler. Chris Sharp is a man. I'm gonna be a pro wrestler. Like, was there a period in your life where you were like, I think this is what I'll do?
Yeah, it was like, I know this is what I'm going to do. And I went to wrestling school. I went to the Squared Circle in Toronto. And while I was there, while I was training, Angelina Love was there and Tracy Brooks was also there. They were like in the advanced ring. They'd already had matches at this point. But I was all in. And I had made an agreement with one of my fellow backyard wrestlers who went by the name of Rage.
Nice.
Rage and Chris Sharp.
Nice.
We made an agreement that we were both going to go to wrestling school. We made a pact with each other. And when I say something, when I say I'm going to do something, and this is in all aspects of my life, when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. So in the summer between my sophomore and junior year, I was going to wrestling school, and it was about a half-ish hour drive from where I was living. I was back at my parents' house, and I was working my summer job. And like, it was a lot. It was a lot on my plate. My summer job was working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and I was renting these cars out, then going to wrestling school after that, then going to wrestling school on weekends. Felt like I was really picking it up very quickly, and I was loving it. And then I kind of came to like a crossroad where I had to decide when it was time to go back to school that fall. I had to decide, was I going to continue with wrestling school, or was I going to focus on school?
You didn't
Because
think you could do both?
I could have done both, but
Mhm.
I didn't want to like only half-ass both.
Gotcha.
So I wanted to be able to put my full ass into both of these
It's
things.
important to use your full ass at all times.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a much longer drive from where I was going to school. It
Mhm.
was about an hour. It was $250 a month, which when you're in college, $250 is a ton
It's a lot of money.
of beer money.
Yeah.
So I went and visited Eric Young's school in Cambridge, Ontario. It was called WrestlePlex Ontario.
Mhm.
And this is before Eric Young was the Eric Young that we know now. He's only a handful of years older than me, which was also strange. So here I am as a 20-year-old kid, and he's like a 25-year-old running this wrestling school, 24 or whatever he was. And I'll never forget, I went into his school to just kind of like, get a lay of the land, see how it would be. And I'm 10 minutes into watching this training session, and one of his students breaks his arm. So he's standing there like on the ropes. His arm is like, ah. And Eric's like, this doesn't happen all the time. This doesn't happen frequently. I'm so sorry. Like, come back another time. And it was just kind of, and it had nothing to do with this guy breaking his arm. I will never remember that or never forget that. But I was just like, you know what? I think I got to focus on broadcasting. Wrestling will always be there for me. But I want to really focus on what I've got here with, I was taking communication studies, and I wanted to really focus on that. Now I've been so fortunate to be able to still dip my toe into the wrestling world while having the other foot firmly planted in the broadcasting world.
Do you ever regret? I mean, you've been super successful in broadcasting, so it's like, obviously that was a good decision, but do you ever have those moments, or probably not anymore, but did you have those moments where you're like, ugh, if I had stayed in school, I'd be doing this or I'd be doing that?
No, I'm really glad the path that I took.
Yeah.
Because wrestling's hard. Not that broadcasting's easy, but wrestling's really hard. And the indies weren't set up that was 2003. The indies weren't set up for success like they're set up now.
Right.
So I can only imagine fumbling and bumbling my way through the indies, being in a heck of a lot more pain now than I currently am. Yeah, no, I'm really happy. And I never look back at anything in my life with any sort of regret. I would have regretted not going to wrestling school, period.
Right.
But I appreciated that I went. I saw what it was about. I know how to do a handful of stuff. I don't think I could work a match, but I know how to bump. I know how to, give a scoop slam. I know how to do the universal spot in every match. That's the, what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Headlock, or lock up, headlock into the ropes, throw them off, leapfrog, drop down. I know how to do that. And I feel good that I know how to do that.
It's amazing.
I feel like it gives me a certain appreciation for these people when I talk to them.
Right. Right. Yeah. And also that you made the choice, right? It wasn't made for you. Like, you consciously made this choice of being like, no, this is what I'm going to do. And then you did it.
I did it. And then I didn't do it.
Right. But I mean, you made the choice to not do it.
Yeah.
In lieu of something else, and you did the something else.
Yep.
So it's like, everything kind of ends up exactly where it's supposed to end up, and then you're still in this world. So it's like, yeah, this is where you were supposed to be.
I'm also a firm believer that if you point yourself in the direction of the thing that you want to do,
yeah,
it just starts to happen. And I know that if I had pointed myself in the direction of wrestling, it would have started to materialize there. But I pointed myself in the direction of broadcasting, and one thing built on another. And I've been really fortunate to be able to have the career that I've had so far. And I'm excited for what's coming next.
Right. And you do the work, right? It's like, if you point yourself in the direction, and also in every opportunity you get, you work as hard as you can, that's when stuff starts to happen. Because I feel like people take on that philosophy of, well, if I think a certain way, or if I think positively, or if I just point myself in the direction and let the universe unfold itself, it'll just happen. But a lot of times it's like, you're not doing the work on the way. You're just doing the positive thinking. And that's not how that happens.
I like to look at the people who are doing the things that I want to do.
Yes.
And it excites me because I go, oh, that means that I can do it now.
Right.
And I spent so much time in college reading bios. And that actually, that's something I still do to this day, but I would be so fascinated to see like, okay, so where did this person start? And then what was the next step after that? Okay, cool. I can start where they started. I can do that. I can go intern somewhere. I can go volunteer somewhere. I mean, in the world that we're living in now, you can say, I could start a podcast. I
Yeah.
can start a YouTube channel. And that's the thing. Those are the steps that you need to take in order to get the success that you want to have.
So when you're doing interviews, do you ever find yourself realizing you're just doing this for yourself? Like there are moments in the conversation where you're like, I'm just getting this information for me now. I mean, I can
100%
Yeah.
of the time. Yeah. Every conversation. Yeah. Yeah. Every conversation I think I've ever had, especially like some of the last handful of interviews I've done with directors,
Right.
like movie directors. I've worked something in where I'm just like, teach me, teach me. I want to learn. I want to be a sponge. Teach me. I don't care about how great it was working with this actor. Like, teach me something that I can learn.
Right. You just want that one little nugget, just that one nugget that you're like, okay, I'm going to add that to the collection.
And that's what I've always done in my interviews. I've always just looked for that one moment.
Yeah.
And I have a very good friend of mine who's fantastic at doing celebrity interviews. His name's Jake Hamilton. He has a YouTube channel called Jake's Takes. And he had these amazing moments. Like he asked Angelina Jolie if she would dance with him during an interview. He asked Morgan Freeman to read a eulogy that he had written out the night before. Like he had these amazing moments. And I went, man, if I could just have one of those moments every single interview, boy, that'd be really memorable.
Did you have to shift your thinking at all when you went into sort of the long form interviews? Because you do a great job of doing conversational interviews, but I think that people don't realize that you're not trained to do that in the work that you were doing before. When you're doing news interviews and you're doing celebrity interviews and you're doing interviews that have moments like that you just described, it's like you've got 5 minutes with this person and you got to make them count. So it's like you have to be super deliberate with your questions. If you want to make a moment, the moment's not just going to happen. So you have to think of the moment before you go in. How am I going to set this up? I got 3 minutes to put Angelina Jolie in a good mood so that way I can lead into the dance thing. Like it's not organic. It's just a different art form, really. So when you start doing wrestling interviews, and especially when you start doing wrestling interviews specifically for YouTube, did you deliberately change the focus of being like, this just has to be a conversation?
Yes, that's a great question, Sam. That's exactly what happened, because early on doing these junket interviews, you get 4 minutes.
Right.
It's 4 minutes. That celebrity sits in that same room the entire day, and a new reporter comes in every 4 minutes, and the cycle just continues. For those interviews, I would write out word for word exactly what my question was going to be. Word for word, I would write it out. Whereas when I do these interviews now, I kind of just list off a bunch of topics and then some subtopics. And then if the third thing I wrote down happens to end up being the 11th thing, and then the fourth thing ends up being the first thing, it's all good. We're just having a conversation. But yeah, you have to be so deliberate in those junket interviews. And I've had some great Jake Hamilton moments, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I had Gerard Butler give me a movie punch on camera, which was so cool. That's
great.
You can't do that in a podcast. What are you going to do? Where do you go from there?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That would be great. Just like 20 minutes in, get a movie punch and then do another 20 minutes of like, all right. So, I mean, that was fun, but Gladiator, was good. The
other thing that I would do with these celebrity interviews is I would realize we were only airing one clip from it.
Right.
So I would push the envelope as much as I possibly could, knowing that if the moment didn't work, if I swung for the fences and, whiffed on it, the only people that would know about it were me and you and the cameraman.
Yeah.
And then the audio gun. That's it. Whereas with a podcast interview, if you come out swinging and you miss, well, you've got another 59 minutes with that person that you got to try to like build things back up and build that rapport back up. So not only are they two different styles of interviews, they're two completely different conversations.
Is there, and I'm not going to ask for names because I hate that question when people do it to me, but is there anything worse than that feeling of like you're a minute and a half in and you realize like this is gonna be on my shoulders today. This is I'm gonna be doing the work
Yeah.
on this one.
And it's funny how we talk about how short 4 minutes is in a junket interview.
Yeah.
But 4 minutes can feel like an eternity if things aren't going your way.
I'll bet if you figure out 20 seconds in, this person doesn't want to be here. You're like, what are we going to just sit here and look at each other? Like you're looking like, is that my time? They're like, you're only 2.5 minutes in, buddy.
I will name names. It's actually a really funny story. So
Okay.
I was in Mexico City for the James Bond junket. And this is when Christoph Waltz was the bad guy in the movie.
Mhm.
Christoph Waltz, incredible, amazing actor.
Unbelievable.
So good. And he played the villain in this movie. And I sat down with him. First of all, I walked in the room. It was just a little bit strange. He was standing in between the two chairs and he was like, "Oh, good to see you. Take a seat." And I'm like, which chair is mine? Oh, yeah. So he sat down. I sat in the other chair. And I asked him a question that I thought was a good question. Obviously, the villain is a bad guy.
Mhm.
And I said, how do you think he would describe himself?
I love
Because
that.
I'm saying he's a bad guy, you know? How do you think he would describe himself? And he looks at me and he goes, "It is not my job to do your job. I'm not going to describe this character for you."
But that's not what you were saying. You were saying, how would he justify his behavior so that he doesn't consider himself a villain?
That's what I was. That's
That's
what I
what
was
you're
getting
saying.
at. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
he's a movie villain, but no, every movie villain feels justified in what they're doing.
Of
They're not,
course.
out to
Like a
just ruin
wrestling
the movie.
heel.
Exactly.
Yes.
And the interview was all downhill from there.
Oh.
And it wasn't the worst interview of all time. It was just uncomfortable. And I think that Christoph was like relishing in the fact that he made people feel a little bit
Sure.
uncomfortable.
Sure.
And again, he is a phenomenal, amazing actor. And I ended that interview like a minute early. It was just like, okay, well, thank you very much. And oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Nice to see you.
And he's still doing that. I'm being polite, but I'm not being polite. Like, I love that.
Then I did an interview with him like 2 or 3 years later in New Zealand
Uh-huh.
for the movie Alita Battle Angel. And it was like I was interviewing a completely different person. He
Mhm.
was so kind and warm and friendly. He was funny. He was laughing at my jokes. I was laughing at his jokes. And I think that if I wanted to distill this down to something that might make sense to me, I think that he was like kind of reflecting the way his character was. He was a villain in this Bond movie. He was kind of being a bit of a villain in person. He was a father and a warm, loving person in Alita. All of a sudden, that's who I got in the press tour.
I love that. And I bet that's true because he's such a good actor that I
Such
bet
a
he
good
does when he
actor.
starts talking about it like a lot. When he gets into press mode, he probably does fall into some elements of those characters. I could buy it. I believe it.
He was so lovely when I saw him the second time around. In fact, we went to a little dinner the night before and all the stars of the movie were there. And Christoph gave a toast
Oh.
to the director. And I was like, this guy's fantastic.
By the way, a minute ago, I said Gladiator in reference to your Gerard Butler story, and it's driving me crazy because
You
obviously.
meant 300.
Yeah, and Russell Crowe. Yeah. I got
It's
it.
okay.
Okay, so like everybody like who's been cursing me out on like listening to this or watching this, I know. Okay, I know.
This is Sparta.
So going back to your dead spots as a fan, when you started becoming re-obsessed, when you got obsessed
Yeah.
the first time and then re-obsessed the second time, especially now that the network is there, do you find yourself going back and watching stuff that you missed from either that like, you know, golden era or the new generation era? Because like for me, I love the new generation era. Love it. However, that's because I was watching it when I was a kid. Like it's, I mean, 1993, 1994, 1995 is not historically known as the greatest time in the world for WWE, but
Right.
I
Yeah.
can't get enough of it. But it's because it's what I was watching as a kid. Do you go back and watch that stuff, or, you know, in your downtime when you just want to watch some wrestling, do you find yourself going back and watching the stuff that you already know you love?
Yeah, it's the latter for sure.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I missed a ton. So this would have been like, you know, 03, 04, 05. don't feel like I missed there was obviously some great matches in that time with Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero. There was obviously great stuff happening, but I don't feel like I missed anything. And if it was big enough, I probably saw it at some point during that time. Now I feel like I'm just watching a lot of current stuff. I couldn't tell you the last time I went back and watched something old. I love the element of surprise. I don't even like watching the same movie more than once, unless it's Back to the Future, because that's the greatest movie of all time.
Just the one, or do you watch the trilogy?
Oh, so good.
I
just love being surprised.
Yeah,
What do we got here?
I just got the box set.
Yes.
It literally just happens to be right here. But yeah, Back to the Future is one of those movies where I'm like, I'm not watching just the first one. Like, we're gonna be here a while because we're going through the whole trilogy. We're gonna witness the whole story.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. But you don't really go back and do that for wrestling as much.
I don't go back and watch a ton of old stuff. Certainly not an entire show.
Right.
And I'm sorry if this is like sacrilegious for me to say this.
No, I mean,
I'll go back and watch specific matches.
Yeah.
I'm blown away by athleticism. Like, I love the Will Ospreay style of wrestling.
Uh-huh.
I was a huge fan of Kid Cash and ECW.
Oh yes.
I loved the cruiserweight hour that WCW was doing. I love that style of show me something that I can't physically do.
So your favorite,
I love that.
So your favorite call of all time is Kid Cash is money.
How did you know?
Joey Styles said it every match. I loved it. Me and my buddy would be sitting there because we used to go. We started going to ECW shows a lot towards the end because they started running the Manhattan Center all the time, and we were late in high school by that point, so we could just go in and go to the shows. But we would just sit there yelling it to each other throughout all the Kid Cash matches. Kid Cash
ECW only came to my neck of the woods once. It came to Mississauga, Ontario at the Hershey Center. And I was working my high school job at PJ's Pet Center.
Nice.
I was working in the fish department. And one of my coworkers, I was 16. One of my coworkers was like a casual fan. And I'm like, come on, Tyler, let's do this thing. And he's like, all right, we'll do that. All right, we'll go. And we drove. It was almost an hour. And we went there. And it was one of the greatest shows I've ever been part of.
Those ECW shows. So I've been thinking about this a lot. I think I'm going to do something about it on the network because I've been thinking about people don't really, when they think about ECW, they don't think about the generations that were there because it was only around for a short period of time. But I kind of see 3 different generations of ECW talent. And part of that is because really the generation that everybody thinks about is Raven, Sandman, Sabu, Dudley's, Taz. Yeah. Yeah, but when all those guys started getting scooped up, there was this whole second wave that I think was started by the guy you just mentioned. I think Mike Awesome and Masato Tanaka, that rivalry started this next wave, and Kid Cash was part of that next wave, and Steve Corino was a big part of that next wave, and Rhino and all those guys. What kind of period of time, when you think about ECW, is there one period of time that as a fan you're like, yeah, this is my ECW?
So I wasn't really aware of it until I think about 2000.
Right.
I'll never forget, Mike Awesome was the champion, and Joey Styles was putting him over so hard on the air. He's basically saying, look how much better he is than Triple H. He was using those words. I can't remember who the WCW champion was at the time, but he was talking about how much better Mike Awesome was than the WCW champion. So that was the era that I watched, and I watched it until it was done.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense because obviously when you're in New York, it's only got to come from Philly to New York. We got to get it way early, and then it just, makes its way around. So you are that last gen. I mean, I think I love that because I don't think that last class that ECW had gets any attention. And I think that they should. When you look at what the Impact players, Justin Credible and Lance Storm, were doing, even a guy like C.W. Anderson. You probably are familiar with C.W. Anderson.
Yeah, C.W.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'll tell you the reason why they don't get the credibility that they should. It's because of what WWE ended up making them with the Invasion and the Alliance. Justin Credible was an absolute beast. Lance Storm was amazing. Mike Awesome, so good. And then they come into WWE and you're like,
well, to be fair, WCW ruined Mike Awesome way before WWE
They
got a
absolutely
chance.
did.
Yeah. I mean, when you go from, it's so funny. Like I was thinking about that when you were talking about how much he was being put over in ECW, because he really was. It was like we lost a lot of talent, and we are now putting everything on Mike Awesome. Like Mike Awesome, the whole purpose of Mike Awesome was to be the unbeatable champion that eventually Rob Van Dam beat. But Rob Van Dam gets injured and Mike Awesome goes to WCW. And it's just so funny that he goes from Mike Awesome is the best wrestler in the whole world and he's better than all the other wrestlers. And then he's like, no, he's that 70s guy, Mike Awesome. He's the fat lady Thriller. You were incorrect, Joey.
I almost feel like for a lot of these guys, when they jumped ship in that era, that last ECW era, and when they went from there to WCW or WWE, especially WWE was basically saying, you're not as good as you think you are.
Yeah. And, who knows? I mean, ECW was such a unique environment and it was such its own space. Like, you didn't watch ECW thinking, oh, this will work anywhere. You watched ECW because it was like, this is it. Everything about just the whole vibe works because we're all here together because this is ECW. Like, I don't think... I remember I went to the last pay-per-view. I think they had two live events booked and that was it. But technically they were running commercials for the next pay-per-view. Except the internet kind of knew. They were like, the building's not booked. They're not selling tickets. Like, they're not like, there's no shows booked except for these other two shows. And we're all just sitting there going, well, maybe they're just taking a break. Well, maybe they're going to call this guy. Well, maybe this is going to happen. Maybe this is an angle. And it's like, no, we know this is gone. It was a real tough loss. And I think that's part of the WWE invasion thing is that there's nothing another company could do to recreate ECW. It could never happen. Like, it's impossible. So, but we ECW fans were all left with such a hole in our heart.
Yes.
After ECW just flat out disappeared.
Yeah.
That we're going like, okay, they said the 3 letters. That means this thing is back. And you're like, it's not coming back, dude. It can't. I know how much you want it. I know how much I want it. And it just can't.
I think it's crazy that 20 years later, those guys still get ECW chance.
Yeah.
Tommy Dreamer will come out, whether it's at Impact or MLW or wherever he happens to be working. EC-Dub. And I think that this all goes back to one thing that brings us all together as wrestling fans, and that's nostalgia. We love nostalgia as wrestling fans.
Nostalgia is awesome. Dude, I was sitting there. So on the network show, I did a whole 22-minute monologue about The Undertaker and Kane. And I really did a lot of work for it. Like, I went back and I watched every segment leading to the debut of Kane. Like, I went through all the episodes of Raw. Thank God for the network and everything being chaptered out. But I watched all the promos and everything. And it really gave me this next level. Like, I remembered living through it, obviously. But it gave me this next level appreciation going like, oh, my God, this really was perfect.
Yeah.
But,
nostalgia is a funny thing because we remember it as being this amazing, perfect thing. And then sometimes you go back and you watch, like if you watched a full episode of Raw from 98, 99, because all the time, the Attitude Era is the best. Attitude Era is the best. Yeah, Attitude Era was great and produced more stars than any other era. If you watch a full show, you'll be going, oh.
Yeah. I mean,
Naked Midian? Really?
First of all, I love Naked Midian, but he's my favorite wrestler. But I mean, I don't know. For absurdity, I like absurdity.
I like absurdity too.
I don't like it at the expense of other stuff, but I'm like, I don't know. Like, we saw Phineas, we saw Midian, he's done a lot of great stuff. He could be Naked Midian now. I'm not mad at it. But
I like absurdity when, like, I loved the Jericho and MJF singing. I thought that was great absurdity. Mae Young giving birth to a hand, that's the kind of absurdity I could do without.
Maybe, but I don't think 20 years from now we'll be sitting there going like, what one of the amazing moments was that we have to talk about? Jericho and MJF singing. We're
certainly not saying that about the hand.
We're still talking about it.
We were talking bad it was though.
Dude, I love it. I love all that stuff.
Oh man.
I love that somebody was like, I get such a kick out of the idea that like WWE at that point has got more eyes on it than ever. And it's just because a couple of people laughed. I don't know. What if she gave birth to a hand? And then they actually did it. I think I'm appreciating it on a very meta level.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like I'm like going,
especially since you've been in there, you've been behind the curtain. You kind of understand how things work.
and I'm like, this is just happening to make you laugh. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like that's my favorite part of any of this. But you're right though. But you are right. Like I think it's even more impressive that the Undertaker and Kane storyline could happen in an era that was so car crash television. That like stuff was just moving and like, you know, titles were being swapped and half the stuff didn't matter. And you were still able to pull off something that actually did have a long-term play and actually mattered. Like, yeah. Because I think you are right. Like if you watch a full episode of Raw during the Attitude Era, chances are that it's not going to hold up the way you thought it would.
Yep. And people are so hypercritical of the product that they're seeing now. People have always been hypercritical.
Yeah.
And I just think that this just goes back to that idea of like nostalgia is more of an idea. It's a feeling. It's the feeling of like, man, maybe I should get back together with that girl. And then you meet up with her for coffee and you're like, oh, I can see why we broke up.
Yeah. You have that moment where you're like, wow, I hate you. I forgot. I don't like you at all. I don't like you as a person. Like I never want to see your face again. Like, but you're right. You do. You think back and you think of all the good times. So you think of how good you felt in the good moments. And you're like, I'd like to have those good times again. And you're like, oh, wait, there was a bunch of other stuff. Though. Yeah, I forgot about the trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you had you had your brush behind the curtain too. I seen you wearing the AEW blazer.
A little bit. Yeah. So that was wild. And you probably have a very similar story to you working for WWE, but I'd been doing a bunch of interviews last year with a lot of different AEW talent. Started with Chris Jericho, which led to Tony Khan, which led to the Bucks, Cody. I was just kind of doing one after the other and the interviews were doing great. It was, you know, a hot time to be doing those interviews with that talent. And then in July, I got a DM. I got a Twitter DM and they said, how would you feel about, or would you be interested in being part of our first show? Yeah, of course I would.
You're like,
absolutely, I would.
Would I like to be a part of history in the wrestling business? Like, that sounds like it would be a good thing for me. Yeah, I would like to do that. Yes.
So we went back and forth a little bit and I said, can we talk about this on the phone? Like, let's have a quick phone call.
Because you're on DM still. You're like, this doesn't feel real if it's being done through like, DM.
Is this real? We had a phone call and I said, so is this like an every week type of thing? They said, well, it's going to be the first episode. And yeah, we'll see what happens from there. But we're planning out this first episode. It's in Washington, D.C. By the way, nobody knows that it's in Washington, D.C. So that's confidential information. I said, look, I honestly don't know if I'm able to do this with the current contract that I have. I was working for the Fox affiliate in Miami. I was hosting an entertainment show called Deco Drive. I'd been there for 5 years.
Right.
My YouTube channel was really starting to gain momentum. And I knew that there was life outside of just being on that show in Miami. And I looked at this as an opportunity. I'm like, I can't do both. My contract will not allow me to do both. So I got to figure out, like, what am I going to do here? And I went and had a very difficult conversation with my boss. And my boss was like, look, I know how much you love wrestling. I don't understand why you love it so much, but I know that you do. So go do this thing. I was like, okay, great. And my last day hosting Deco Drive was a Monday.
But so you quit the job.
What's that?
You quit the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't quit the job. I went from one job to another job.
Well, you left it though, I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, not saying you're a quit. I'm saying like that shows like, that's an amazing step to take. That's a step that I think that's that step that a lot of people would be afraid to take.
And this part of a bigger conversation of like, I moved to America. I moved to a new country from Canada 10 years ago.
Right.
And kind of like thought to myself, I always wanted to host a national show. I always wanted to be on that national scale. I took a job at a local news affiliate in Cleveland, being an entertainment reporter, which afforded me so many amazing opportunities. Covered the Oscars 5 times, the Grammys 4 times. I won 4 Emmys while I was there. I interviewed everybody. From there, I went to the local station in Miami, the Fox affiliate I was just talking about. I just kind of had this moment where I was like, I didn't move to a new country to just be a local news person. And I saw this as an opportunity to do something more.
Mm-hmm.
So my last day hosting that show was a Monday. Flew to DC that Tuesday, went to the production meeting. Wednesday, we were on Dynamite.
By the way, those little things though, like in going to the production meeting, like as a fan,
So cool.
like that's just the whole, every minute of it just has to be like so much fun.
It was very cool. Like I sat in the first ever production meeting for Dynamite.
Right.
And at the front of the room was Cody and Kenny and the Bucks and Tony, like all sitting there at like a, like a head table, kind of like you're at a wedding. And the rest of us were sitting around these like circular tables with, the rundown in front of us. And we're going through the rundown, like segment by segment by segment. And then it, finally came to my segment and I was like,
I have a segment. Yeah.
Cody's running the meeting and he like looks over at me. He's like, yeah. So then this next segment here, we've got Jay and Silent Bob and our man CVV over here is going to be running that. That's me.
Yeah.
Okay. That's me. Okay, great. Yeah, it was all very, very cool. And to be part of the first wrestling show on TNT in almost 20 years as a massive wrestling fan, yeah, it was a really, really cool thing. And I didn't expect anything more from it. And then a few weeks later, I happened to be on the episode in Charleston, South Carolina with the Rock and Roll Express, who then got beat up by a very scary Santana and Ortiz.
Sure.
It was just so cool
to
be part of all of that.
And are you the type that it's easy to go like, you know what? Like, even if this isn't happening every single week, like just to be a part of this stuff, even if it were to just happen twice, like that's twice. That's amazing. This is so cool. Or are you like, as much as I want to be that person, I got the itch. Now you made me want it more. I want to do it again. I want to do it again.
But we're living in such a strange time right now that I don't even know if it's possible.
Right.
Like, these last 8 months have been so weird as a wrestling fan watching, fanless wrestling. So I don't know what's possible there, but before COVID, I was just like, I'm so glad I got to experience that. It made me hungry, not to be on Dynamite more, but it made me hungry to like want to be on national television more. I've been a TV host for 15 years of my career. And that's my entire career, by the way. So I'm a TV host for my entire career, always reaching for that next thing. So this really lit a fire under me to go, oh yeah,
national TV.
More.
Yeah.
Which is exactly why I moved to Los Angeles. Moved to Los Angeles 4 months ago because if you're a TV host and you're an entertainment reporter, this is where stuff happens.
Right. So where are you looking toward? Do you see yourself, getting on one of the entertainment shows? Is that where you see yourself, the Mario Lopez, if you will, route?
Yeah. I mean, those shows I feel like are dying a very slow, painful death. And that's nothing against any of those shows. I just feel like
it's TV, right?
They served a real purpose when the internet was in its infancy and, when the internet didn't exist. Sure. I would absolutely love to be a correspondent for E or Extra or Access Hollywood, but I'd also love to host a show that really showcases all the things that I love doing, which is like pretty much anything. I just posted a video where it's like me swimming with alligators, swimming with sharks, bungee jumping, skydiving. I tried out for the Miami Marlins and I tried out for the Florida Panthers and I learned how to hike a football with the Miami Dolphins. Like I love learning how to do new stuff and I don't ever feel uncomfortable in any sort of new situation. So I want a show like that where I can go in and go, let me just do everything.
I love that. So that's the show we're selling. That's it. Chris Van Vliet does a whole bunch of stuff. I would watch that show because I'm not doing any of it. I was like, I saw you post a video bungee jumping where you said, what'd you say about fear?
Fear doesn't prevent you from dying.
Right.
Fear prevents you from living.
Right. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not jumping off a bridge. That's what I
Why
said.
not?
That's what I said when I looked at that. I was like, cool. Yeah, but I'm staying on the ground, Chris. I'm not jumping off a bridge.
This is the whole reason. I'm actually going to post that entire bungee jump video on my YouTube channel. Actually, maybe by the time this video or this interview drops, it'll be out.
Yeah.
But I want to put those out there to show people that like anything's possible. It is entirely possible to do absolutely everything in this world. And the only person that's standing in the way is you.
That is true. And I mean, I feel like you must feel that now more than ever. When you look at the stuff that you've accomplished and the things that you've gotten to do and everything, like it must just feed itself, where you're going like, well, if this is possible, then that's possible. If that's possible, then that must be possible. And it just keeps going and going and going.
That's exactly it. And it was actually a conversation I had with Tyler Perry that really shifted my thinking. And I've interviewed him, many, many, many times. And we developed a friendship. And I remember he was like, so what are you doing? And I told him what I was doing. I'm hosting this show in Miami. It's been great. I just traveled to Paris and I was in London before that. I'm in LA next week. And I just started this fishing company. I love bass fishing. I started this fishing company. He's like, yeah, but like, what else are you doing? And I'm like, what do you mean?
Hey,
he's like, you got to dream bigger. I'm like, huh. And at first I was like, what do you mean I got to dream bigger? Like, I'm already doing all these things. I'm doing the things I want to do. And then it started to hit me. It's like, those are good accomplishments on like this level.
right.
But he's saying the only thing stopping you from being at this level to this awesome level up here is you. Dream bigger. And I'm like, wow. And he's one of the main reasons that I'm living in Los Angeles now, because I'm dreaming bigger.
Right. Because you've got this thing. You didn't move to Los Angeles with any guarantees, right?
No.
Right.
My main thing right now is YouTube and the podcast.
Right.
Now I'm auditioning for other things, and it's obviously a tough time right now with COVID, but no, I didn't move here for a job. I moved here because I knew that the jobs were here.
Right. You moved for opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I moved to create the opportunities.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you have to, that's the reality of it, right? So
That's what you got to do.
you asked me about bucket list interviews. I'll ask you the same thing. I mean, I feel like you've done a very good job. I've always heard that vague goals get vague results. Clearly, you have very specific goals because you match them. I mean, I remember, I think it was last year, you doing the, 50 wrestlers in the year, and you ended up doubling it or something like that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I said I wanted to do 50 because the year before I did 40.
Mm-hmm.
And like the YouTube thing kind of was just an accident. Like I was just putting these YouTube videos up because I wanted them to live somewhere. We were doing these, 15, 20-minute interviews and only airing 10 or 15 seconds on TV. So I was putting them on my YouTube channel just so they could live somewhere. And 2 years ago, I'm like, well, what if I actually started going out of my way and doing these interviews? What if there was an indie show with a big star and I drove and made that interview happen? So that's when the vague goals get vague results really started becoming a thing. In terms of bucket list interviews, the two that were at the very top of the list
Mm-hmm.
were The Rock.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been able to interview The Rock. This is now a running joke.
Mm-hmm.
I've interviewed The Rock 9 times. Not that I'm counting or anything like that. A picture on my wall here of one of our interviews, and he autographed a magazine cover right before WrestleMania 28.
That's awesome.
Yeah, WrestleMania 28. Looking at it over there. Number 2 was Tom Cruise. So after I did The Rock, and I was able to do that interview with The Rock in 2012, and I got The Rock backstage at Raw. It was like when he was building, to the Cena thing. It was really before he was The Rock that we know now. Like he was just on the cusp of making like that really big shift in his career. He was just about to film G.I. Joe 2, or I think it was just promoting G.I. Joe 2. And then things really took off, right after that. So it was Rock and Tom Cruise, and both of them, even though they're completely different people and in completely different genres, they are very similar in a lot of the things that they do. And I learned a lot from my short interactions with both of them. And number one is like, be present. And both of them are so incredibly present in that moment. And you've experienced this a lot of times in the interviews you've done. They look you in the eye. They make you feel like you're an important person. They make you feel like you're the most important person in that moment.
Yeah.
Even though with my interview with Tom Cruise, we were on a red carpet. It was in Paris. There was thousands of people shouting his name and taking photos. And it was as if it was just me and him had met in like a random hallway. And he like looked me in the eye and had this great conversation with me. And yeah, and they're also like super charismatic. Like both of them have this charisma that oozes out of them, so much so that it makes you more charismatic just by being in their presence.
Right. You're almost like, if you want to start this cult, we could start this cult. we could do it. I'll
Yeah,
join. Whatever you want to
start
tell
this
me.
cult.
Whatever you want to say. Yeah, I'm following you, dude. Yeah, it is. It's that presidential energy where it's like all of a sudden you're at the center of attention and you're like, oh my God, did we just make a connection? And then they're on to the next
Yeah.
person and you're like, wait, I think we're best friends. I think.
Have you ever had a conversation with a president?
No,
I like that you had to think about that.
Well,
I feel like you'd know if you met a president.
I definitely never met a sitting president, but like I was trying to think if I ever interviewed Trump, because I know like he did Opie and Anthony a few times, but I don't think I've ever interviewed him.
I was at an event last year and Bill Clinton was making his rounds, and he happened to be next to me, and I'm like, well, I got to take this opportunity. So I shook his hand, and my goodness, you want to talk about presidential energy? He's the best at that.
Yeah.
Like he is just the absolute best at making you feel so significant in that moment.
That's what I've always heard about him. I mean, that's like one of the things that like is his legend is that he will walk into a room and for one moment he will make everybody in that room feel like this is all about you.
And it was so funny because you could see the Secret Service around him, just kind of like keeping an eye on what was going on around them, around Bill. And he was kind of making his way, having these little conversations. And one conversation ended and I was just like, oh, I got to shake his hand. So I shook his hand just thinking like, oh, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. And then I thought that'd be the end of the conversation. And he kept holding my hand during like the handshake. And he's like, oh, so where are you from? So then we have this conversation. It was a moment where I wasn't really prepared.
Right.
And, me and you we've interviewed a lot of famous people,
right.
But it was one of those moments where I wasn't prepared for what was going to happen. And then it ended up turning into like a 10-minute conversation. And I felt like, why are you still talking? This is amazing, but why are you still talking to me? This is a party that like Oprah was at and like all these other like huge names. And I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
But this is so strange.
I feel like 30 seconds in, I'd be like, in my head, I'd be thinking he's got to leave because I've run out of stuff. Like I don't have, I'm done.
Part of me was thinking like Secret Service was just going to come in and be like, yeah.
Yeah. Like they're not going to believe that this is his choice. They're going to, all right, leave the president alone, whoever you are. It's like, I was just, he wouldn't let go. Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure. I'm glad we finally did this. If you go over to Chris Van Vliet's YouTube channel, not only will you find just an immense library of great wrestling interviews, do you ever think to yourself, like as you're talking to somebody, and not that it has anything to do with you, I'm not asking from an ego perspective, but like I've interviewed people, wrestlers specifically, and they'll be telling me stories, and I'm sitting there going like, and maybe it's just because I think of wrestling so highly, but I'm going like, this is a historical document. This interview that's happening right now is a historical document. Not, you can cut me out of it completely. Just this stuff that this person is giving me right now this is history. This is so important that this exists.
I don't know about important that it exists. But there's certain moments where someone's telling me a story and I'm like, this story has never been told publicly.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing this. Like when Batista told me the story behind Give Me What I Want. And, I was interviewing him for the Stuber junket and I was just like, did you realize in that moment that Give Me What I Want was going to turn into a meme? He's like, no, I forgot what I was saying. and we were trying to drive at this one point and Triple H was supposed to end up saying something and I couldn't remember what I needed to say to have him get to that point. So I just kept saying, give me what I want. Give me what I want.
That's great.
Then I had a moment with Hogan and it wasn't on camera and I wish it was. I had to tell him this and I tell The Rock this frequently. I say, WrestleMania 18 is my favorite match of all time. Rock Hogan, my favorite match of all time. I was there. I was in the 16th row and the crowd was, going bonkers. I remember when I told Rock that, he goes, yeah, who are you cheering for? I was cheering for Hogan. He's like, yeah, me too. But I asked Hogan, so this is even crazy for this to be a sentence.
Sure.
It was an interview with Hogan and Flair at the same time. They were doing this like Q&A panel at the Hard Rock Casino in Hollywood, Florida. being moderated by Eric Bischoff, but I was going to get Hogan and Flair at the same time. So we're in this hotel room where we were going to do this interview with Hogan. We were waiting for Flair to like come up the elevator and come into the room. So we had like, 2 minutes.
Mhm.
So I said to Hogan, favorite match of all time. I said, I got to know though, did you realize that the NWO was going to turn on you? He goes, oh, brother, I had no idea. The referee just told me to stay in the ring. I thought that was strange because Rock had won the match, but they just told me to stay in the ring. And sure enough, he had no idea what was going to happen. Mike Chioda just told him, stay in the ring, stayed in the ring. And that's when the NWO came out. And he said that Vince saw the reaction that he got during that match and said, we got to turn him face. We got to have him in the red and yellow.
I love that. I mean, and
So
that's
not only did the NWO turn on him, when he gets backstage,
Yeah.
Vince goes, do you have any red and yellow? And he's like, I haven't worn that in years. And he goes, Vince lent me his private jet, had me fly from Toronto to Tampa. I found some box in my attic, which I hadn't looked at in years, grabbed the gear, hoped it would fit, got back on the jet, and then went the next day to Montreal for Raw. Wow.
unbelievable. Yeah, that is, I mean, I just love that it's WrestleMania and you're just so like reading the crowd and just feeling it that you're like, the turn has to happen right now.
I couldn't believe that story. And if I ever interview Hogan again, I need him to tell this story on camera. But it meant so much to me because that's my favorite match.
Yeah.
It meant so much to me because I was there. And now I'm learning this information from the guy in the match that
Crazy.
nobody else knows.
And if I interview Hogan before you, I just steal the story right from you. And
Please, go
ahead. Well, what I was saying was there's all these wrestling interviews on Chris Van Vliet's YouTube channel, but you can also find an interview with yours truly if you go over to Chris Van Vliet's YouTube channel. You can also get him on the Chris Van Vliet Show podcast if you're an audio listener. And anything else? Anything that I'm missing? I know you're a busy guy. I know you got the Tyler Perry dreams.
Yeah, just dreaming bigger, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, wherever you're listening to this, you can find my podcast. So, Sam, thank you.
Thank you.
I love being able to do interviews in person. It's obviously a strange time right now, so we weren't able to do this in person, but I look forward to being able to shake your hand in person again, hopefully someday soon.
Yes, and while I enjoy doing interviews in person, I also love staying in my house. This thing has made me more of a hermit than ever. So hopefully one day we will do an interview in person and it will take place with you in my house.
Done.
Perfect.
I'd love to come to your house.
Perfect. Come on over.
I can force you to eat weird foods.
That's right. We'll do all kinds of content.
Even though weird foods to you are apple pie and spaghetti.
Yeah. A hamburger would do it. Like, oh, what is that? Thank you, Chris.
No, thank you.